This video contains spoilers. You might want to view the series in question before watching this review.
So, we meet again. Stop right where you are! Our only chance is to throw our combined solar powers. I have created a perfect world. We're trapped in some kind of force field. Oh, my captain, the terror of the planet. Why have you brought us here? Let the battle begin, Your Highness. The galaxy trio at your service. The baby needs a spanking.
The Hanna-Barbera Fantastic Four cartoon originally aired on September 9th, 1967. The series' original air date on Toonami is unknown because it was aired on Cartoon Roulette, which I've covered in a separate video. This show is naturally based off of the Marvel comic of the same name. Now, I would like to state, since this is the first review I'm doing that is based off of source material from a different medium, I will try to do compare and contrast exercises when I feel they are necessary for future Toonami series. I would also like to say for future reference that I consider myself a somewhat avid reader of Marvel comics. I don't think I'm super duper knowledgeable about everything in Marvel, but I own quite a bit of Marvel books, and I think I've got a pretty good handle on how everything works, even though I'm not caught up in all the new stuff that's coming out. Now, I like almost everything in the Marvel Universe, although that's not to say there isn't bad stories either. I really like Moon Knight, Daredevil, Doctor Strange, Punisher, the Avengers, either in their individual stories or when they're all teamed up, and I have a particular love and collecting obsession for Spider-Man, X-Men, and the Cosmic books. I love all that stuff and more from the Marvel Universe, but one thing in particular is missing from all the Marvel series that I've read is the Fantastic Four. This is especially odd, considering that they're not only Marvel's first family, but they also feature the first appearances of many of my favorite characters and concepts, but I've never read their books. And I realized when I was first putting together the list of all the Toonami shows I had to review, I knew I was going to struggle with this one because I didn't have any inherent knowledge of the FF. If this were, say, an Avengers show, X-Men show, Defenders, the original Guardians of the Galaxy, or even the freaking Champions, I would have something more substantial to say.
Who?
Exactly. Okay, give me a minute. I'm gonna go read some Fantastic Four, I suppose. Alright, I'm back, and they're okay, I guess. Now, before the FF fans start typing away telling me that I didn't read the right stories, I will inform you that I chose 3 of the most popular Fantastic Four runs. While I mostly read the original Stan Lee and Jack Kirby run, since that was the run the series is based on, I also read some issues of the John Byrne run from the 80s and the Jonathan Hickman run from about 6 years ago. Even with the later stories, I just wasn't really into it. Now, that's not to say that I believe the Fantastic Four is a bad series. In fact, I still had a certain amount of fun reading their books. It's just that I don't think they're really for me, but I'll elaborate on that later. For now, I think it's beneficial to take a brief look at the history of the comic before getting into the show itself. In the 1950s, the comic book industry was in a bad place. Overzealous parents groups and politicians had crippled comics in the 50s, particularly superhero comics, and drastically reduced their popularity due to claims that they were the cause of juvenile delinquency and violence. It's because of this that most publishers focused on other popular genres to stay afloat, like Western, romance, mystery, and monster comics. Now, by 1961, the industry was on a slight upswing with rebooted versions of The Flash and Green Lantern over at DC, as well as the formation of the Justice League of America, but something was still missing in the medium. So, in November of 1961, Marvel Comics got the now legendary duo of Stan the Man Lee and Jack the King Kirby to create a superhero team of their own. Stan had observed the heroes DC published and realized that their characters were perfect and infallible, but to him, that didn't make for a compelling story. So when co-creating the Fantastic Four, he made sure to give them character flaws, and not only external conflicts, like who the villain of the week was, but internal and personal conflicts as well, like having to pay the rent on their home base, the Baxter Building, or the Thing dealing with the fact that he looks like a monster. And I think it's specifically important to mention the Thing because of Stan's idea behind the Thing is that while he was making a superhero book, he realized they didn't always sell well, especially at that time. So he created the Thing to convince his editors that it wasn't just a superhero book, but a monster book as well. Needless to say, it worked. After the Fantastic Four was released, it was a huge hit and caused Marvel's superhero line to snowball with the likes of the Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, Spider-Man, X-Men, Ant-Man, the Avengers, Daredevil, and more. In fact, most Marvel historians point to the Fantastic Four as the true beginning of the Marvel Universe. Now, along with all this popularity, it was only natural that Marvel got multimedia deals and started to branch out. The first really significant wave of non-comic Marvel media is the cartoons from the 60s, the most popular of which is the 1967 Spider-Man cartoon. However, Iron Man, Submariner, Hulk, Thor, Captain America, and the Avengers, all together that is, got the animated treatment as well from Grant Ray Lawrence Animation, who famously just animated the actual comic panels in these series. When Fantastic Four was brought to television, Marvel sent the rights to Hanna-Barbera, and they created the show that we're covering today. The problem is that, and you've probably already noticed by now, that there's either a Cartoon Network or Boomerang logo at any corner of the screen on the clips I'm showing, and I apologize for that, as I prefer to use cleaner DVD footage, or better, but in this case I have no choice. I try to do at least some research for all the shows I review for this series, and I found that for some reason the rights to this show never went back to Marvel and has stayed within the Hanna-Barbera, now Time Warner's, vaults. The weird thing is, Hanna-Barbera has released DVD sets of many of their 60s cartoons, but never of this show. There are many theories as to why there is no DVD release, ranging from the fact that Fox currently has the film rights, and that might extend to television projects, to the fact that Time Warner not only owns Hanna-Barbera, but also Marvel's own competitor, DC Comics, and it would be counterintuitive to release DVDs for the opposing company. It's a sad fate for any show to be caught in legal hell, but there's nothing we can do. Whew, okay, so with that out of the way, those uninitiated in comics and superheroes might ask, well, what is the Fantastic Four actually about? And I suppose I've delayed long enough. The basic premise of the Fantastic Four is that four explorers go out into space on a mission to Mars. Unfortunately, a surprise blast of cosmic radiation causes their ship to malfunction, and they crash land on Earth with debris everywhere. But the passengers don't have a scratch on them. The four of them soon discover changes made to their bodies by the radiation, including incredible powers allowing them to achieve what was previously thought impossible. They soon decide that these great powers could be used for good, and they form the Fantastic Four, not only to protect those in danger, but also to understand their newfound powers and the strange universe they reside in. Before we get into their adventures, we've still got a few things to talk about, with the first being just who these people are, and keep in mind I'm going to be using their comic book backstories as the show kind of glosses over their history very briefly. Our first, the typical de facto leader of the team and general super genius galore, Reed Richards aka Mr. Fantastic. Reed was anything but normal growing up, as he flew by all his classmates academically, particularly in the fields of science and math. He was in college by the age of 14, and when traveling from one school to another, he met some other important players in this little drama, including a man named Ben Grimm, who was a star athlete and a good friend of Reed. He even offered to pilot one of his experimental spaceships. Another significant player was a girl named Sue Storm, who was 13 when she met the then 19-year-old Reed Richards, as he rented a room in a boarding house owned by her aunt. She quickly developed a crush on him, and though he did not reciprocate these feelings, she would hold on to this crush throughout her teenage years. Oh, yeah, and Reed met with some guy called Victor Von something, but I don't think he ever went on to do anything of importance. Anyway, by the age of 22, Reed had earned multiple PhDs in physics and engineering, and worked for the Army for the next 3 years as a scientist and communication specialist. After all this, he met back up with Ben Grimm, Sue Storm, and her brother Johnny Storm. After their failed space flight, Reed gained the power to stretch any part of his body, but generally that's not his best superpower. No, that would be his quick thinking and ingenuity, as more often than not he is elected to outthink his opponents than overpower them. The problem is, he's often more focused on his work and/or exploring the universe, and sometimes other universes, than he is with the people closest to him. Speaking of those closest to him, let's get back to Sue Storm, who after meeting Reed again, charmed her way into his heart and was quickly engaged to him. After the accident, she became the Invisible Girl, and later renamed to the Invisible Woman. She naturally has the ability to turn invisible, but Lee and Kirby quickly found that this was not the most useful power in combat, so later on they gave her the power to make invisible force fields and constructs, which also allow her to float in the air. Now, Sue is probably the member of the FF that's changed the most over the years, because at first, and in this show as well, she played kind of a dainty damsel in distress. Sure, she would be in fights, but most of the time she didn't do much except maybe sneak behind the villain of the month. However, later writers and artists would make her into the most powerful and terrifying member of the team. And if you wanted to know who the second strongest member of the team is, look no further than Ben Grimm, though after the accident was better known as the Thing. Obviously, Grimm's changes were the most drastic, as he looks nothing like his former self because his entire body is made of solid rock. This not only means the general public ostracizes him for looking different, but he also gains incredible strength, enough to wrestle the Hulk, actually. Regardless, his new look made him self-conscious about public appearances and for the most part only hangs around the other FF members or his love interest Alicia Masters, who, for a blind woman, is quite the vision. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Nevertheless, this self-doubt that Ben has made him a big fan favorite and generally is the character most adaptations get right. Except for the officially unreleased 90s movie. Yes, I watched it. It's as bad as you expect. Now, this leaves one member left, and I think the best way to introduce him is with a quote from the great comic book writer Mark Waid. "The Avengers' battle cry is Avengers, assemble!" The Fantastic Four's is Johnny, wait! Johnny was only 16 when he joined the space flight that gave him the power to transform his body into a flaming plasma, as well as the ability to fly, shoot fireballs, and go hotter than the sun. All of this without any harm to his body. As you can imagine, Johnny is a hothead both figuratively and literally, and is usually the one to first jump into a fight, but also pulls pranks on his teammates all the time. Usually his target is the Thing, though. After going through their characters, I think my disconnect with the Fantastic Four lies with two things. One, I don't find myself relating to their characters too much. The second reason is I also didn't connect with the FF's main theme. What I mean is, every great superhero has a theme to them. Spider-Man is all about responsibility. Batman is about justice. Superman and the Flash are about hope. Daredevil is about fear. Wonder Woman is about truth. Green Lantern is about willpower and emotions. Personally, I think X-Men has many themes, but the most common is discrimination. I could keep listing forever, but the point is most great superheroes have at least one theme to them that connects us with them on a deep, personal level, and I think Fantastic Four is no different. Looking at the team dynamic, most people soon discern that they make up the basic family unit. Reed is the wise and thoughtful father. Sue is the loving and protective mother, while Johnny and Ben are the two arguing siblings. Above all, family and how a family is able to stand each other is the theme of the Fantastic Four. And for some reason, I just don't connect with that theme. This is why I'm saying that I don't think the FF are a bad superhero team, but they're just not for me. I always relate to Spider-Man's struggles with his responsibility, the X-Men's conflict with discrimination, but not to the FS. Anyway, the only other problems I had with this show was something else related to the comics. You see, the comics in the 1960s were very wordy. The characters in these books talked a lot. Even during fight scenes, they would spout practically whole paragraphs at each other. Now, I did a side-by-side comparison between a couple of the episodes and the issues they're based on. Most of the time, the writers did not take the dialogue word for word, but sometimes they would change the order of some words or replace them with synonyms. Despite this, the show kept to the spirit of the comics and still had characters talk a lot, even during fight scenes, which drags the pace down significantly.
Oh, no, you don't. I'm the fella does the clobbering around here. The Thing! In person, Buster. Your only weapon is brute strength, Thing. Let us see how you fare against my greater strength. How come villains always making cornball speeches when they throw a punch?
The last thing to really review is the art and animation, though there's not much to tell as it's pretty standard 60s Hanna-Barbera stuff. Nothing too great for its time, but not terrible either. That didn't stop me from catching some animation errors, though. Alex Toth, who I've mentioned in other Cartoon Roulette videos, returns to do the art and for the most part makes very minor changes to the character designs, giving them their distinct and recognizable look, aside from some palette swaps. While this show sometimes exceeds its other 60s action cartoon brethren, it's still pretty standard in many ways, though the adaptations of various early Fantastic Four stories is the real draw here. And if you watch any episode of this series, you should watch the Galactus episode. I give Fantastic Four a 6 out of 10. Next time on the Toonami Retrospective, I will be reviewing Voltron, Defender of the Universe. Thanks for watching.